In the heart of a forgotten land, a dying millionaire cowboy collapses at the doorstep of a poor widow's home. With nothing but kindness, she takes him in, unaware that the man gasping for life would soon turn her world upside down. A story of pain, redemption, secrets, and a destiny none of them saw coming. The wind howled across the barren plains of northern Wyoming, stirring up dust devils that danced under the fading amber sun. It was a forgotten place where time crawled and life had little mercy. At the edge of that emptiness stood a crooked little house, patched with mismatched boards and memories too heavy to carry. That house belonged to Ella May, a widow barely in her 30s, and her 2 children, Jonah, age 10, and little Clara, just 7. Ella had buried her husband 3 winters ago after a failed mining accident stole him from them. Since then, she'd lived in quiet survival, feeding her children with whatever she could grow, barter, or pray into existence. The town of Durley, 10 miles down the road, had stopped caring long ago, so Ella cared for herself. She was tough, dry-eyed, and bone-weary, the kind of woman life had shaped with fire, not kindness. That afternoon, while she was chopping firewood, Jonah came running from the ridge with eyes wide and arms flailing. "Mama, there's a man. He's on a horse, but he's barely holding on." Ella dropped the axe and followed him toward the trail. There, wobbling in the saddle of a dusty black horse, was a man slumped forward, his hat drooping over his face, blood soaking through a torn shirt. The horse, exhausted but loyal, had somehow led him here. As they got closer, the man toppled and hit the ground with a sickening thud. Ella knelt beside him. His face was weathered, leathery from sun and age, with a gray beard and eyes that fluttered in and out of consciousness. He whispered something, maybe a name, maybe a plea, and passed out cold. She could have left him there. Should have. But Ella was raised by better ghosts. Without a word, she signaled Jonah, and together they dragged the stranger into the house. They laid him on the couch by the fireplace, and Ella worked through the night cleaning his wounds, whispering prayers under her breath, even though she didn't believe in God anymore. In his coat pocket, she found something strange, a hand-drawn map. And something else, a crumpled letter addressed to someone named Jackson Cole. By morning, the man was still breathing, though barely. Ella sat beside him as the fire cracked and the children slept nearby. She studied his face, tried to read the story written in his scars. She didn't know it yet, but the man on her couch was Jackson Cole, a cattle baron worth more than most towns. A man with enemies, secrets, and less than a week to live. Or so he believed. The second morning came with frost on the windows and silence thick as fog. Jackson Cole hadn't moved much, save for the occasional grimace that tugged at his weather features. Ella sat at the edge of the room, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of weak coffee, her eyes never straying too far from the man who now occupied her living room like a storm waiting to break. She had changed his bandages, spoon-fed him broth when he stirred, and watched for any signs that he was more than just a broken body. But still, the man slept. And while he slept, questions grew in her mind like weeds. Jonah had taken it upon himself to patrol the land around the house. With a stick in hand and a cowboy hat far too big for his head, he played the part of protector with a fierce determination. Clara, too small to understand danger, simply whispered stories to the stranger when no one was looking. "You look like someone Daddy would have trusted," she said one morning, gently patting his hand. On the third day, Jackson's eyes opened. They were a pale steel blue, not soft, not warm, but sharp like broken ice. He looked around the room with confusion at first, and then recognition, as if a piece of memory had snapped into place. "Where am I?" he rasped, voice dry as rust. "You're in my home," Ella replied, calm but guarded. "You nearly died out there. Your horse brought you here. He tried to sit up, but groaned, his hand pressing against his ribs. Ella moved closer. "Don't. You've got 2 broken ribs, maybe more. I did what I could, but you need rest." He nodded slowly, then locked eyes with her. "Name's Jackson. Jackson Cole." Ella didn't flinch. She already knew. "You got folks looking for you?" Jackson hesitated. "Not the kind you'd want finding me." Ella studied him, not liking the answer, but understanding it all the same. She'd seen that look before, in soldiers passing through after the war, in desperate men hiding things they could no longer carry. "You're safe here," she said, after a pause. "For now." The next few days passed slowly. Jackson began to regain strength, asking for small tasks to keep his pride intact. He chopped wood one morning, nearly passing out. He tried to fix the chicken coop and collapsed beside it. Each failure seemed to harden something inside him, a frustration not with the world, but with his own mortality. But something else was happening too. He started talking to Jonah, teaching him how to sharpen a knife, how to judge the wind by the trees. To Clara, he told old stories, wild tales of ghost towns and river gold. She laughed like she hadn't since her father died. And Ella, always watching from the porch, began to feel something shift. Not dread, but curiosity. One night, over dinner, Jonah asked a question no one dared. "Mr. Jackson, are you rich?" The room went quiet. Jackson looked down at his plate. "I was." "Don't know if that matters much now." Ella raised an eyebrow. "You don't look like a man who lost everything." "I didn't lose it," he replied, eyes darkening. "I walked away from it." She leaned forward. "Why?" He looked straight at her. "Because someone wanted me dead, and they almost got their wish." A cold wind seemed to pass through the room. Clara clutched her blanket. Jonah leaned closer. "You mean someone tried to kill you?" Jackson nodded slowly. "Someone I trusted." Ella stood and began clearing the plates. She didn't press further, but inside, her gut twisted. She was housing a man with enemies, dangerous enemies, and they could come looking. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Jackson sat on the porch with her, wrapped in a borrowed coat. "You got every right to ask me to leave," he said quietly. "I'm trouble." Ella stared into the darkness. "I've known trouble." "You're something else." He chuckled bitterly. "A dying man?" She shook her head. "No, a man who doesn't know why he's still alive." He didn't respond, just looked out into the plains, where shadows stretched like fingers across the land. She glanced at him, then spoke softly. "You've changed the way they smile, my kids. I don't know why, but that means something to me." Jackson nodded, jaw clenched against emotions he hadn't felt in years. But neither of them knew that miles away, across those empty plains, riders were moving. Men in dark coats. Men who had been paid handsomely to find a man named Jackson Cole and make sure he didn't live to tell the truth. The past wasn't finished with him yet, and this little family had no idea what storm was coming their way. The storm came in silence. Not with thunder, not with rain, but with tracks in the dirt and whispers on the wind. 3 riders crossed the edge of the canyon that morning, their silhouettes like vultures perched against the rising sun. They moved slow, deliberate, watching the earth for signs, until one of them found what he was looking for. A discarded horseshoe, fresh dung, hoof prints leading southeast. "They're close," said the tallest rider, a scar running down his cheek like a crack in stone. The others nodded, silent as the guns on their hips. Back at the little farmhouse, life had almost begun to resemble something normal. Jackson, though still weak, had begun helping more, fixing the window hinges, repairing a busted hinge on the barn, and even rigging up a water barrel to catch rain. He didn't ask for thanks, and Ella didn't offer it. But something unspoken lingered between them, growing slowly, not like fire, but like coals warming beneath ash. Jonah followed Jackson everywhere, hungry for a father figure. Clara, too, had taken to calling him Mr. Jocks with the kind of innocent fondness that made Jackson's chest ache. It reminded him of a time before blood and betrayal, a time when his own brother still looked at him with trust instead of greed. That afternoon, while clearing debris near the pasture, Jackson found Ella alone, repairing a broken fence post. Her sleeves were rolled, her hands caked with soil and splinters, and her jaw clenched in stubborn defiance of the hard life she lived. Jackson watched her for a moment, then stepped in. "Mind if I help?" She didn't look up. "You'll slow me down." He grinned. "I'll consider it a lesson in humility." Together, they worked in silence, hammering and tying wire. After a while, she spoke without looking at him. "Who was it?" Jackson paused. "Who was what?" "The one who tried to kill you." He hesitated, then drove the nail in hard. "My brother." Ella froze, her hand resting on the wire. "Name's Clayton Cole," Jackson continued. "He was always the smart one. Ran the numbers, kept the books. I built the ranch with my hands. He ran it with his pen. I never questioned him until I found out he'd been laundering money, selling off pieces of the land behind my back." Ella slowly turned to face him. "And when you found out?" "I told him I was going to the sheriff. Next day, I was ambushed on the trail. 3 men. Gunmen. Pros. One of them shot me in the ribs, left me for dead. I barely made it to the horse." She nodded slowly, absorbing it all. "And the map in your coat?" Jackson glanced at her. "You went through my pockets? I cleaned your wounds. I figured I earned the right." He smirked. "Fair enough. The map shows where Clayton's been hiding the land deeds and false contracts. It's proof, but I never got to the sheriff. Instead, I ended up here." Ella crossed her arms. "So what happens now?" "I don't know. I thought I was dying. I made peace with that, but now—" He looked at her, something soft and painful in his gaze. "Now I ain't so sure." But peace was short-lived. That night, as wind rattled the shutters and coyotes cried in the hills, Jonas spotted something from his window. Flickering lights, far out on the ridge. "Mama," he whispered. "There's fire. Lanterns, maybe." Ella rose, heart pounding. Jackson, already alert, stepped onto the porch with his rifle in hand. He squinted into the darkness. "Riders," he muttered. "They found me." Without waiting, he turned to Ella. "I need to go. Now, I won't bring this to your doorstep." But she shook her head. "You can barely run a mile. You'd be dead before sunrise. I'm not putting your family in danger. You already did. But now you're here. That makes you our problem, too." He looked at her, surprised. But before he could speak, she grabbed the old Winchester her husband left behind. "We'll hide you in the root cellar. They won't see it under the floorboards. I built it myself." He raised an eyebrow. "You built a secret cellar?" "I was a miner's wife. We learned to hide things." With quick precision, she led him to the corner of the kitchen, lifted the heavy trapdoor beneath the rug, and helped him climb down. Just before she shut it, he grabbed her hand. "If anything happens to you, it won't," she cut in. "You taught Jonah how to track, Clara how to laugh again. That counts for something." And then the door shut, plunging him into darkness. Moments later, there was a knock at the door. Ella opened it slowly. 3 men stood there, faces half lit by a lantern glow. The leader, scarred face, cold eyes, tipped his hat. "Evening, ma'am. We're looking for someone. Might have come this way." About 60. Gray beard. Wounded. Ella stared him down. "Haven't seen anyone." "You sure?" "I don't lie to strangers with guns." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mind if we look around?" "I mind a great deal." Behind her, Jonas stepped out, holding the old rifle like he meant business. Clara peeked around the doorway, eyes wide but unafraid. The scarred man's smile faded. "We'll be nearby, in case you remember anything." And with that, they rode off, but not far. In the cellar, Jackson held his breath, heart pounding like a war drum. He knew this was only the beginning. Whatever piece he had found was cracking, and what he didn't know was that Ella May had secrets of her own, secrets buried deeper than his, secrets that could change everything. The night stretched long and unforgiving in the little farmhouse. Beneath the creaking floorboards of the hidden cellar Jackson, Cole lay in the darkness, every sound amplified. The slow drip of water, the distant howl of a coyote, the faint creak of the house settling into the cold earth. His breath came shallow, his mind racing. Outside, he could hear footsteps, Ella moving carefully, her soft footsteps a comfort and a reminder of the life he was fighting for. But there was something else, something heavier, in the air. Ella sat beside the kitchen table, the weight of the evening pressing on her. The encounter with the men had rattled her more than she cared to admit. She poured herself a thin cup of whiskey from a cracked bottle, the liquid burning a trail down her throat, a small rebellion against the cold that settled in her bones. Her eyes drifted toward the dark horizon, where the riders might circle like vultures, waiting for a chance to strike. She hadn't told Jackson everything. How could she? Her past was wrapped in shadows, too fragile to reveal, a past that now threatened to crash into the fragile new world forming between them. Ella's silence was not just about protecting herself, but protecting her children. For years, she'd kept secrets buried deep, locked away like a rusted box, hidden beneath the floorboards. Secrets about the man she lost and the choices she made after. As the wind rattled the window panes, Jackson was pulled from his restless thoughts by a sudden creak. The trapdoor above him shifted slightly. A faint light spilled into the cellar as Ella's face appeared, framed in the glow of an oil lantern. She climbed down carefully, setting the lantern on the wooden floor beside him. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Jackson nodded, squinting against the flickering light. "I've been thinking about what you said, about secrets." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Before your brother betrayed you, before the shooting, my husband was killed because of those same men. They're connected, the ones who want you dead and the ones who took him." His eyes narrowed. "I didn't know. They came for the land my husband worked on, a claim that could have meant everything to us. But it wasn't just greed. It was power and lies." Jackson reached out, his rough hand brushing hers. "You should have told me." "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid it would put my kids in danger." He squeezed her hand gently. "We're in this now, together." The fragile bond between them grew stronger in the dim light, but so did the weight of the dangers closing in. Outside, the horses' hooves returned, closer this time. The men were circling, tightening the noose. Ella led Jackson upstairs, her resolve hardening. "You're going to have to trust me." He looked at her, a flicker of hope lighting his weary eyes. "I don't have much choice." That night, as the children slept unaware, Ella revealed the secret she had guarded for years, a hidden safe beneath the floor, containing letters and documents from her late husband, evidence of the corruption that had poisoned the land and stolen lives, including her own family's. Jackson studied the papers by lantern light. Each page was a puzzle piece in a dangerous game, one that reached far beyond the dusty plains. Names, dates, forged signatures, proof of a conspiracy that ran deeper than either of them imagined. "We can fight this," he said, voice low but steady. Ella nodded, determination hardening her features. "But it'll cost us everything." Outside, the wind howled like a warning. The enemy was closer than ever, and the night was far from over. Night fell over the plains like a thick veil, darkening every corner of the horizon, with a silence so dense that even the rustling of the leaves felt heavy with foreboding. The sky, once clear, was now cloaked in dark, coal-colored clouds. The air was thick, electric. Martha sensed it before she saw or heard anything. This night would not be like the others. Something was about to happen. Inside the cabin, Jedediah sat at the worn wooden table, watching the shadows stretch across the cracks in the window. His gaunt, pale face now carried a firm expression, the look of a man who knew his time had run out. Since deciding to protect this family, he had known the confrontation was inevitable. The men who had been circling the property for weeks were ready to strike, and he, even in sickness, would not allow them to take what he now valued more than any ranch. Those 3 children and the woman who had given him a reason to live again. Martha moved quickly to organize the children, forcing a calmness into her voice. She hid Lily, still weak, beneath the bed with Ben, covering them in blankets and whispering that they must stay quiet, no matter what they heard. Samuel insisted on helping, refusing to hide. Though young, his eyes had seen more than many grown men's, and his courage was a reflection of the man Jedediah was becoming. Outside, horses approached with muffled, deliberate steps. 5 men, brutal, armed, and determined to take by force what they had failed to seize through intimidation. Their leader, Harlan Pike, an old rival of Jedediah's, didn't just want the land. He wanted to humiliate the sick cowboy, to erase his legacy. This place ain't worth nothing without a strong man in charge, he shouted, his voice cracking through the night like thunder. But Jedediah wouldn't give in. Breathing heavily, supported by his old rifle, he stepped through the front door, hands steady. Lightning lit the night, revealing his weakened but upright figure. Behind him, Martha appeared with a weapon in hand, her hands trembling, but her eyes unwavering. They weren't just defending a house. They were defending their right to exist. The first shot didn't come from Jedediah, but from one of the intruders, hitting the cabin wall with a sharp thud. The reply was swift. Martha, with more accuracy than she believed possible, shot the hat off one of the men, forcing them to scatter. Jedediah, body aching, kept his aim steady. He didn't need to hit them all, just to show that as long as he stood, no one would take anything from this place. The gunfight was brief but brutal. Shots echoed through the hills, mingling with the crack of lightning above. Samuel, hidden near the door, handed them ammunition as Martha and Jedediah took turns holding the line. When one of the men tried to flank the cabin, he was caught in a makeshift trap that Jedediah had taught Samuel to build. The attacker fell with a scream, and the others hesitated. This was no longer an easy conquest. It had become a living trap fueled by courage and desperation. Harlan, realizing he wouldn't win that night, pulled back. "This ain't over, Cole," he shouted before vanishing into the darkness with his gang. But to Jedediah, this was a victory, not because of the enemy's retreat, but because of the resistance itself. A living proof that, even with a body ravaged by illness, his soul remained unbroken. As silence returned, and the first drops of rain fell onto the dry earth, Martha dropped to her knees, hands stained with gunpowder, eyes brimming with tears. Jedediah approached slowly, leaning on Samuel's shoulder, and together, without a word, they understood something had changed forever. The night had taken something from them, their peace, their illusion of safety, but it had also revealed something greater, that together they were stronger than they ever imagined. Inside, Lily still slept, unaware of what had just unfolded. But her face was no longer pale. Warmth had returned to her skin. And there, in the heart of a threatened cabin, beat something stronger than fear or pain, the rebirth of a family. And though danger still loomed, a new certainty rose with the sound of the rain. They now had something that neither death nor greed could ever take away. The battle had ended, but the scars remained, etched deep into the land, the house, and the souls of those who survived. The prairie, once a place of loneliness and despair, now whispered promises of rebirth beneath the gentle caress of the morning sun. Jackson Cole sat on the porch steps, staring out over the fields that stretched toward the horizon like an open invitation. The wind was softer today, carrying with it the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. Ella stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The lines of worry that had once marked her face were softened now, replaced by a quiet strength forged in fire and hope. Jonah and Clara played nearby, their laughter like a fragile melody breaking through the silence, a sound Jackson had longed to hear for years. The hard road they had traveled together had changed everything. The papers in Jackson's hands, once proof of betrayal and greed, were now tools for justice. With Ella's knowledge and the help of their newfound allies, they began the slow work of reclaiming the land stolen by Clayton and his cronies. It wasn't easy. The wounds ran deep, and the past was a stubborn shadow. But each step forward was a victory. Jackson looked down at the letter he'd carried with him since the day he collapsed on Ella's doorstep. It was a note from his late father, urging him to be a man of honor and courage, no matter the cost. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket, a reminder of the legacy he now intended to build, not just as a rancher, but as a man worthy of the life he had been given a second chance to live. Ella approached him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "You saved us, Jackson." "More than you know." He smiled, the first genuine smile in a long time. "No, Ella, you saved me. When I thought I was dying, you gave me a reason to fight, to live, to believe." Their hands found each other, fingers entwining like roots grounding them to this new beginning. Around them, the sun climbed higher, casting light on a world full of possibility. Jonah ran up, breathless but beaming. "Dad, look, the fence is fixed, and the chickens are safe." Clara followed, holding out a bouquet of wildflowers. "For you, Mr. Jax." Jackson knelt to accept the flowers, his heart swelling with a joy he hadn't dared to imagine. The children's faces were bright with hope, hope born from the kindness of a widow who had opened her home to a dying man, unknowingly changing the course of all their lives. As the day unfolded, the farmhouse buzzed with life once more. Neighbors came to lend hands, to share stories, and to celebrate the fragile peace they had fought so hard to win. Plans were made to rebuild the town's future, rooted in honesty and community. And somewhere deep inside Jackson, a seed of love took root, not just for the land he had reclaimed, but for the family he had found in Ella and her children. The journey had been long and perilous, filled with loss and sacrifice. But it had also been a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of forgiveness, and the unexpected ways kindness can heal the deepest wounds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of gold and crimson, Jackson and Ella stood side by side, watching the stars begin to twinkle. "Whatever comes next," Jackson whispered, "we face it together." Ella smiled, a quiet promise in her eyes. Together. And with that, the dying rich cowboy and the poor widow who saved him stepped into the future, forever changed, forever bound by the life they had rebuilt from ashes.